I hate the Pelicans' pick of Micah Peavy in the second round of the NBA draft, but it has nothing to do with Micah Peavy, the player, since I actually like him. Are you confused? I'll explain why the Pelicans process concerns me in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans in NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with an extra Friday show. This is the second Friday show I'm doing. There's a lot going on with the team, by the way, right now. And I want to look at the second round pick of Micah Peavy. I like Micah Peavy, the player, but I'm going to tell you why I don't actually like the selection of Micah Peavy in the second round. That sounds weird, but I promise it'll make sense when we look at the process for the Pelicans. We're then going to get more into the draft pick that they traded to trade up and get Derrick Queen. Is the process just flawed? I want to get a little bit deeper into the protections or lack thereof around that pick because I do think that's an important part of the conversation. And then James Borrego linked to the New York Knicks. We're barely getting to that right now. That might be worse than you think. We're going to break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Oh, by the way, you can watch the show the same place you watch your Pelicans games, the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, 10:30 every weekday. So let's get into the Pelicans selecting Micah Peavy out of Georgetown. Hold on to that thought for a moment. In the second round. Look, I like Micah Peavy, the player. This is a senior from Georgetown who did a great job last year, averaging 17.2 points per game, 6 rebounds, almost 4 assists, and shot 40% from three. We love a guy like that. This is a dude who's an NBA-ready defender. There's shades of Herb Jones in him here. His instincts, the way he can jump into passing lanes, all of that's fantastic. Good size at 6'6" with a 6'7" wingspan. With him, Herb Jones, and Trey Murphy, you've got some nice wings here in New Orleans. They're gritty. They can be good defenders. Trey's got good size. I don't know. I kind of love it, right? Even if that jumper is really only 1 year's worth of data on it being good, he was not good before with all of this. You know, at Texas Tech, he was a non-shooter whatsoever. TCU, he had more volume, but never shot above 31% from three. And then at Georgetown, just really blossomed as a shooter. It's 1 year. I don't know if I love, it's not that I don't love it. I like 40%. You just are concerned if it's real or not. It's kind of the same concern about Sion James from Tulane and Duke here. But he's a guy that's NBA ready and will earn minutes on this team because he's a good defender, especially under head coach Willie Green. This is not someone who gambles recklessly on the perimeter. He knows when to jump passing lanes. He has really good instincts. Look, wing depth for a potential 3-and-D guy. I like Micah Peavy absolutely here. He's a role player. He's not a guy that's going to create his own shot or anything like that. But look, whatever. It's a smart dude who's going to fit right into team defense. And given the Pelicans are skewing a little offensively right now, you could use a guy like this. But I hate the process that landed the Pelicans Micah Peavy. I'll tell you this. Between a lot of New Orleans media and actually a couple people around the league that I talked to before this being like, what do you think the Pelicans are going to do? Everybody basically said Micah Peavy. You know why? Because he went to Georgetown. Troy Weaver was the first hire that Joe Dumars made. He even said in his press conference after the first round of the draft, the first call he made was Troy Weaver. Because he likes Troy Weaver, thinks Troy Weaver is super smart, brought him here to New Orleans, said Troy Weaver is the best. I think was the exact quote. Almost every single move the Pelicans have made this offseason has ties to Troy Weaver or proximity to Troy Weaver, other than the Indiana pick thing, which I'm fine with that move. Every move this offseason has ties to Troy Weaver or proximity to Troy Weaver. Go to the trade with the Wizards. Troy Weaver was a consultant, whatever his title was, for the Washington Wizards last season. Well, Jordan Poole was there with Troy Weaver. Saddiq Bey was there with Troy Weaver last year, even though he didn't play at all. Troy Weaver drafted Saddiq Bey. There's a bunch of ties right there. The other part of it is Derrick Queen. We'll get into that pick and why it's a big risk. And look, that move is being universally panned right now. I don't think of it as negatively as some do, but I don't say I love it. But Derrick Queen played at Maryland. It's right by D.C., right? It's like 12 miles away from Washington, D.C., essentially. Georgetown is 12 miles away from the University of Maryland. And one of the assistant coaches at Maryland is Troy Weaver's son. Troy Weaver watched a ton of Maryland basketball. Derik Queen, and they gave up a lot to move up and draft Derik Queen. And now you get to Micah Peavy, Georgetown, D.C. You know, right now, everything they're doing is linked to Troy Weaver, essentially. Is he, I don't want to say like shadow running the team or anything. It's not quite that. But you get the point that I'm saying. You can't just draft and acquire players that have ties to Troy Weaver. Troy Weaver was 74 and 244 in Detroit. That's a winning percentage of 23.3%. I don't think his tenure in Detroit, when we reflect on it after this past year, is as bad as those numbers indicate, but it ain't good. They were thrilled to be rid of Troy Weaver. You get what I'm saying here right now. Every move the Pelicans made has about a 12-mile radius from Troy Weaver. Now, TBD if these all work out for the most part. Fears wasn't, the Troy, doesn't have those kind of links that I'm aware of. But overall, that's somewhat concerning. You don't want the pool of players that the Pelicans that could acquire have either been guys that Troy Weaver drafted or have been involved with or were in the radius of DC, right? When you hear that Troy Weaver likes to scout and likes to be really involved, right now the dude isn't casting a wide net. Now, that could be fine. It might not be, though. That is slightly concerning here. You had Maxime Reynaud, who I would have preferred they draft at 40, and they didn't take him. They need a stretch big. They don't have one. All right. It's a second-round pick. I'm not going to nitpick that or scream or be all that upset. But you see what I'm saying here, right? This is like a tech bro in New York City setting his Tinder radius to 1 mile because he doesn't want to go anywhere. That's how their scouting and drafting is going right now, and moves and offseason is kind of going. It's just a 12-mile radius from DC. That's a lot, not alarming, but it's something that I'm like, hold on, you see a pattern here. And is that the pattern you want to see? That's concerning. The reason I don't like this pick is that I like Peavy. I think he's a good player. I think he's going to fit well in New Orleans. I'm excited to have him here. And it's overshadowed by a potentially, I'm not saying it actually is, flawed process. This could just be coincidence right now, but it's concerning. Another thing that's kind of concerning is the pick the Pelicans could give up next year. I want to dive into that a little bit more. I've had more time to think and process about it. There's a couple things that worry me about it, even if I'm not as down on that move as a lot of other media is. Let's break that down coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Skims Men's Underwear. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was definitely intrigued. I've heard a lot about the quality, the comfort, all of that from other folks. So I wanted to give it a try. And let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I'm literally wearing a pair now. It's not the same pair that I've been wearing the past couple days. I actually ordered a bunch of them because I really, really like them. I've always had kind of issues buying underwear, whether it's fit, comfort, or finding just a style that I liked. I don't want stuff that rides up. I'm not a big fan of like cotton. I actually prefer a more like stretchy material here. And that's what the Skims 5-inch boxer brief has. They never ride up. They're comfortable all day. They're really breathable. So whether I'm running from the office to the gym, I can just wear this. I'm on planes a lot. If I'm on a 4 or 5 hour plane flight, you gotta be comfortable, right? Wearing the Skims 5-inch boxer brief, perfect, can survive all of that. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select Locked On Pelicans or Locked On NBA in the drop-down menu that follows. That's skims.com. You've really got to give these a try. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NBA. The offseason never sleeps in the association. They're covered all over the Locked On NBA podcast, whether it's rumors, whether it's draft picks, free agents, all of that. We've got you covered to be the most up-to-date NBA fan that you know over at the Locked On NBA podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. By the way, shout out to everyone who says hi at the Board of Trade thing that I was at earlier. If you know, you know. Anyway, appreciate y'all tuning in. Look, I appreciate everyone tuning in over the past week or so. We've been putting out a lot of shows. There's a lot going on. I appreciate all the support, even if at times it's a little bit maddening around this team. But look, they're always kind of interesting here. So I explained, let me know what you think about I keep wanting to call him Jake Peavy. That's a baseball pitcher, I think. Micah Peavy pick in the comments down below. Do you like it, but do you not like the process? Both those things can be true. Now, I want to go back to the Derik Queen trade. I put out a whole show on this. The everydayers have already seen it. I'm not as down on that move as a lot of other people are. Because look, the Pelicans are going for it. I don't necessarily lock them in as a playoff team, but I think they're going to be in the mix for a play-in spot, and that probably puts you around the 14th pick, in the draft next year. If Queen's your guy, the 14th pick next year, I'm fine with this, right? That's not so much the big thing. Just not having a first-round pick next year isn't so much the thing. You could get one. You could trade into that draft if you really, really want it. It's not about not having a pick. The big deal is that they gave up a pick that could be valuable. And again, I don't hate it as much because I see what the Pelicans are doing. They're trying to be competitive. So when people are like, that could be the #1 pick, I really don't think that. And I'll explain why in a second here. So I don't hate it as much as what everyone says. But everyone is bashing this trade because the Pelicans are betting on themselves, right? That's what they're doing here. They're absolutely betting on themselves. And no one else is willing to bet on the Pelicans. There's something to that, right? When everyone is like, that's a mistake, and the team themselves are like, this isn't a mistake, maybe you need to go with the majority on that sort of thing. It doesn't matter, right? If, they bet big on themselves and it pays off, it pays off. But no one is willing to do that, partially because no one believes in Zion Williamson right now. This is probably one of the reasons why they didn't trade him is there isn't a ton of value to be had for him because of the injuries and the lack of playing and, truthfully, some of the off-court stuff. So the Pelicans are betting big on him, but look, I traded Zion away in a mock draft that we did. I'm not really even betting on Zion right now. But the Pelicans are trying to be competitive. So by not having that first-round pick or giving it away unprotected, they're like, we're going to be good, so we're not even concerned about it. And you know what? I don't have a problem with that. But here's what's kind of interesting about the pick, and that's that it's got swap rights with the Milwaukee Bucks. So this is not a pick that the Pelicans fully control. They control it in that they own it, but there's an element of things that they don't control about it, and that's what makes this kind of interesting to me. There's no protections on it. You would have liked this to have been top 4, top 5, top 6 protected, but it doesn't sound like the Atlanta Hawks would have done this deal if that was the case. Let's keep that in mind too. They can control what they can control, the Pelicans, meaning we're going to be competitive, we're going to be good, so the pick won't be that good. All right, sure, I'm on board with that. But because it has swap rights with the Bucks, if the Bucks are bad, that pick becomes even more valuable, right? If the Bucks are a bottom 4 team, the Pelicans don't control that. They have nothing to do with whether the Bucks are good or not next year. Now, I don't think the Bucks are going to be bad. They're not trading Giannis, in my opinion. I would imagine they're going to be good. And your argument might be, well, what if Giannis gets injured? I'm not banking on keeping a pick for a guy to get injured. One, that's an awful thing to do. And two, they're going to try and be competitive. So if a freak injury happens, but you don't want to bank on a freak injury because look, that doesn't actually happen all of that often. So, but if the Bucks are bad, or maybe they end up trading Giannis, again, the Pelicans don't control any of that, this pick becomes insanely valuable. It's a top 4 pick. Derrick Queen would not be a top 4 pick in next year's draft. And that then becomes the problem with it. The Pelicans control one side of this. They do not control the other side. In a sense, this pick has 2 chances of being really good, as opposed to the normal just 1 chance of being good that the team would then control. So that's one of the reasons why this move is being panned across the league of you don't control what the Bucks do and the Pelicans don't. And that's a big part of the risk with it. You really, really would have liked them to have put some protections on this. It doesn't need to be a lottery protected pick, but top 4 definitely would have been the smart thing to do. But I'll tell you this from talking to people with the Pelicans here. After they made the Jeremiah Fears pick, they immediately started calling teams about trying to trade up from 23. They started with Toronto, trying to get the 9th pick, then the 10th pick. But that was already done to Phoenix, so I don't think there was really much going on there. The 11th, the 12th, they were trying to do every move they could, and they were going to find somebody in that range to trade with them for a deal similar to this. They originally tried to kick this pick further down the road, call it 2020, 2030 or something like that. I actually rather it be next year's pick, even if it could be valuable, because I at least have an idea what the Pelicans are going to be. In 2030, what is this team going to be? Zion going to be here? Is he not? If Zion's healthy, they're good next year. It's kind of as simple as that. Big if, right? But if he's here and if he's healthy, they're good. That controls their part of the equation here. 2030, I have no idea. That pick could be even more valuable in 2030. It's kind of a mystery box a little bit. So they tried to do that. The Hawks weren't interested. They tried to put protections. The Hawks didn't want protections on it and said no dice. And there was some definite possibility that the Hawks were going to draft Derrick Queen there. They went with the big. They got Asa Newell, right, at 23. Part of this might have to do with Bryson Graham being there, knowing that the team probably loved Derrick Queen. Look, it's not hard to figure out the type of players Troy Weaver likes, especially with some of the connections directly to Derrick Queen. Bryson Graham probably being in the building for Atlanta helped them kind of not pull one over on the Pelicans, but extract maximum value. That's not a great position to negotiate from. I don't mind some of the overpay and things like that. I really, truly don't. If this is your guy, go and get your guy. Trust your scouting, trust your process. You got to overpay a little bit. That's how it goes here. And you saw this kind of fall in line with some of the value of trading up, moving up in this first round of the draft. You saw it in a couple of other deals. But I can't say it's like perfect asset management. And you could definitely say it's on the worst side of that here. And then when you factor it in with the pick that was made in the second round, Micah Peavy, again, nothing against Micah Peavy, the player. Micah, if you're listening to this or if any of your family members are listening to this, I'm thrilled you're on the team. I think you're going to make a ton of sense and be a rotation player. I mean that. But you start to look at the process now for the Pelicans, and there's some bigger question marks than there were before. And I think the second round selection kind of hammers that home a little bit, right? If you're calling every team trying to trade up, there's an air of desperation about that. And teams are maybe going to find out about that and get maximum value from you. And you're losing something in those negotiations. That's not a great spot to be in if you're the Pelicans and you're trying to do good asset management. And it is really important that small market teams who don't have some of the big advantages, edges that big market teams do, glamour market teams do, take advantage of. And so you need to be pretty smart about this. And for, even under the David Griffin tenure, that wasn't what they were doing. And right now, while I'm fine with the move kind of by itself, and I'm not even that worried about the pick next year because I don't think the Pelicans are going to be a bottom 5 team. I don't think the Bucks are going to be a bottom 5 team. This pick's 10. I don't even particularly care, right? Cool, you got 13 in this draft. The Pelicans got 2 top 6, top 7 guys on their draft board. They feel good about this, and I get it. I don't have a huge problem with it in a vacuum, but I don't like the negotiating from a position of weakness in the first place. That makes me worried about future moves and what the Pelicans are kind of telegraphing to other teams. So I can defend the move and like that they got Derrick Queen and got 2 young guys that I do think fit on this roster and fit around Zion and others, but also still not like the process from it. Again, we talk often on the show here about process versus results. And at a certain point, the results just need to be more important than the process. I agree with this. But we won't know about that for a little bit. So what we have to look at is, in fact, the process. And the process does not look great the first 2 nights of the NBA draft. I don't even mind the trade with the Wizards, but then you start to look at basically a 12-mile radius for everything. And it's like, I don't love that here. Let me know what you think about kind of both the second round and the first round of the draft in the comments down below. Coming up next, coaching is going to be massively important for this Pelicans team next year. We'll talk more about this next week, but they might be losing someone kind of even more important now, and that's James Borrego. Let's talk about his links to the Knicks coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's where Game Day comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you, and Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop down the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. Actually, today, using Game Time and our promo code LOCKEDONNBA, bought some Dodger tickets because I'm going out to LA for a little bit, and I'm excited to go out there to Dodger Stadium. So Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming game. Dodgers, I'm from LA. That's my team right there. We don't have a team in New Orleans, so it's okay. But maybe you're excited to go see Jeremiah Fears, Micah Peavy, and Derik Queen. Go start to get your Pelicans tickets in advance. The schedule is going to be out before you know it. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast or watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, the same place that you watch your Pelicans play. For your second listen, look, Tyler Shook is doing everything right. They're covering it over the Locked On Saints podcast with Ross Jackson. Make sense of everything black and gold over the Locked On Saints podcast. Make them your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I want to wrap up the show talking about something that dropped like right before the draft, which gets completely overshadowed by literally everything else going on here. I'm looking at some of are there any undrafted players signing with the Pelicans now that the draft is over? Nothing that I have seen here. Tell you this, the Pelicans are definitely going to be looking to add another big man to the roster, by the way. James Borrego, linked to the Knicks, getting an interview with the New York Knicks. Their head coaching search is taking a while here. This, I think at this point in time, would be a big loss for the Pelicans. I'm not the biggest James Borrego guy. I think some of his offense in Charlotte wasn't incredible, and he had a couple of lead assistants there that really helped with that. But look, he was hired to basically be the offensive coordinator for New Orleans. With Jeremiah Fears coming in, with Jordan Poole, with Derik Queen, and some of the other ways you can kind of look at this roster becoming. And you're seeing a lot of guys that can handle the ball, create for others. It gives you the ability to build a really creative offense. This is someone that Willie Green absolutely needs to lean upon to create a good offense and just make the blurry vision that we have of this roster right now come into a clearer focus. James Borrego seems like he could be really important if that's what the job is going to be for him or if that's what the job is supposed to be. You need someone like that to help Willie Green because, look, Willie Green has not shown tons and tons of growth as a head coach. The offense has not looked great. You've wondered what they're trying to do at times on that side of the ball and really lacked a lot of cohesion. James Borrego, is the guy that's supposed to make that all work. Now with basically offensive pieces, right? And offensive pieces that could work together, you need to figure out a way to make this happen. And I am worried that if you lose James Borrego and kind of just keep operating with this coaching staff that you've had for a while now that has not shown the type of growth that you want, what is it going to be? And does that, in a sense, like stunt the growth of some of these guys? This is something I'm going to talk about next week here on Locked On Pelicans. 2 timelines. Those are dreaded words to me, and it seems the Pelicans are trying to do that, and I hate it. It could work out, but I want to look at that, right? But one of the ways that you make 2 timelines work is put rookies in position to succeed, impact winning now while also developing them. If this is Willie Green, you don't make the playoffs, you're going to lose your job. And look, the Pelicans are going for it next year. They've got no incentive to tank whatsoever. If that's what you're doing, can you play rookies Rookie point guards are usually not great in terms of helping you win. They can put up numbers, but they often don't help you win games. Always. Not always. There's certain outliers to it. So if they're trying to win games and you have Jeremiah Fears turning the ball over, is he going to get buried under head coach Willie Green? If Derrick Queen isn't what you want him to be right away and he's struggling a little bit, he's not good defensively, let's say, there's some conditioning issues, does he just get benched? What good does that do you here, right? If Jordan Poole is just going hero ball all the time, what good is that going to do you, and how do you make this sort of thing work? Those are my concerns right now. Does that mean Willie Green's just not going to play those guys? I mean, who else would he play is a valid question, I think, is the counter to that. But at the same point, that's where I'm kind of worried about this. 2 timelines doesn't work. You're either kind of developing guys or you're trying to win, and those two things are often mutually exclusive. So when we talk about kind of what is the Pelicans' vision, other than be aggressive, fight hard, look, you need more than just that. James Borrego seems like the type of guy that's supposed to help the Pelicans kind of achieve this vision of this roster and put it all together. But if he takes that Knicks job, and it seems like it's going to make sense, they've been rebuffed by every head coach that they want. And also, I think it's kind of funny that they're like, yeah, we want to interview Jason Kidd. No. Okay. We want to interview this other guy. No. We want to interview Chris Finch. No. And they're getting shot down left and right. They don't ask to interview Willie Green, but ask to interview one of his assistants. And he almost got the Cleveland job last year. It says something there, right? I'll let you draw conclusions on what that something is, but it says something. It's not great. You need to keep James Borrego now, because you are going to need a pretty innovative offense to, again, make this blurry vision of a roster that we're seeing kind of come together as one thing. We'll see what they do, what happens there. A lot more to come. We'll have a lot more next week here on Locked On Pelicans. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, 6 episodes this week, Jake Madison, at Nola Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I appreciate y'all so much for listening. Leave a comment, subscribe, watch us on TV as well. I'll see y'all next week.